Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So here we have it. On my left, my purple iPhone 11, a classic from back in 2019, and on my right, my blue iPhone 15 from 2023. We're in late 2025, and the big question is, can this 6-year-old phone, which you can now pick up for an absolute bargain, still hang with a much more modern device? Or is the upgrade to something like the 15 not just a nice to have but almost essential now? In this video, we're going to cover everything you need to know to make that decision. We'll look at the design and that huge display difference. We'll talk about real-world performance on the latest iOS 26. We'll see the camera's battery life. And at the end, I'll tell you exactly who I think should buy which phone, or the upgrade to 15 is a great deal. Let's get into it. You know, it's easy to forget, but when the iPhone 11 came out, it was a pretty big deal. It was the first time Apple put a dual camera system with a proper ultra-wide lens on their standard non-Pro iPhone. And maybe more importantly, it introduced night mode, which was like a complete game changer for low light photos. You pair that with the A13 Bionic chip, which was an absolute monster at the time, and a price that was actually lower than its predecessor, the iPhone XR, and you had a recipe for success. It's a huge reason why so many people are still using this phone today. Then you have the iPhone 15. This phone felt like Apple finally bringing some of its best Pro features down to the standard model. The biggest things were obviously the massive 48 megapixel main camera sensor, which was a huge leap from the 12 megapixel sensors we'd had for years, and the dynamic island, which finally replaced that big notch. And of course, the one we all waited for, the switch from Lightning to USB-C. It really felt like a new chapter for the base iPhone. This comparison really highlights Apple's strategy over the years. They introduced these big exciting features on the expensive Pro models, and then a couple of years later, those same features become the major selling points for the standard iPhones. The iPhone 15 is a perfect example of that, getting key features that were exclusive to the iPhone 14 Pro just a year earlier. Now, holding these two phones, the difference in feel is immediate. The iPhone 11 has that classic rounded, almost pebble-like design. The aluminum edges curve smoothly into the glass. It's comfortable, but you know, it also feels a bit dated. Now, the iPhone 15, on the other hand, has the modern flat-edged design, but Apple introduced these slightly contoured edges, which makes it feel much nicer to hold than the 12 or 13 in my opinion. The 15 is also noticeably lighter and a bit smaller, weighing 171 grams compared to the 11's 194 grams. It just feels more dense and premium. And the back glass, the glossy purple on my 11 is a total fingerprint magnet, whereas the matte color-infused blue glass on the 15 feels and looks so much more high-end. Okay, but the single biggest physical difference, the one you will notice every single second you use these phones, is the display. The iPhone 11 uses a liquid retina display, which is just Apple's fancy name for a really good LCD screen. And for an LCD, it's great. But the iPhone 15's Super Retina XDR OLED display is in a completely different league. The resolution is way higher, 460 pixels per inch on the 15 versus 326 on the 11. So text and images are much sharper. But the real difference is contrast. With OLED, blacks are truly black, not a backlit gray, which makes colors pop and watching videos way more immersive. And then there's brightness. The iPhone 11 maxes out at 625 nits, which is fine indoors but can be a struggle in direct sunlight. The iPhone 15 has a typical brightness of 1000 nits but can peak at an incredible 2000 nits outdoors. The difference is, well, it's night and day. It's a massive quality of life improvement that affects everything you do on the phone. And up top, we go from the big static notch on the 11 to the dynamic island on the 15. Honestly, when it first came out on the 14 Pro, I thought it was a bit of a gimmick. But having lived with it, it's genuinely useful. Seeing my timer, my music, my incoming calls, or AirDrop progress right there without having to pull down the notification shade is just smarter. It makes the front of the phone feel more alive and functional, whereas the notch just takes up space. Now let's talk about what's under the hood. The iPhone 11 has the A13 Bionic chip, and the 15 has the A16 Bionic, which was the chip from the iPhone 14 Pro. On paper, the 15 is obviously faster. I ran Geekbench 6 on both of my phones here. My iPhone 11 scored 1762 on single core and 3547 on multi-core. The iPhone 15, it got 2626 and 6538. So yeah, a big difference. But what does that mean in the real world, especially running the new iOS 26? Honestly, for day-to-day stuff, scrolling Instagram, browsing Safari, checking emails, the iPhone 11 is still surprisingly smooth. Apps open pretty quick, not as instantaneous as the 15 of course, but you're not sitting around waiting. Apple's A-series chips age incredibly well, and the A13 is no exception. It's interesting because both of these phones use a 60Hz display, but for me, I can sometimes see a bit more slow-mo in the animations on the iPhone 11 compared to the 15. It's not laggy, but the 15 just feels a little bit snappier. You really only notice it if you compare them side by side, but that difference is there. But, and this is the biggest but with the iPhone 11 in 2025, it's the RAM. The iPhone 11 has 4GB of RAM, while the 15 has 6GB. And with modern apps and iOS 26 getting more demanding, that 4GB is really showing its limits. Here's what I mean. I'll be browsing an article in Safari, then switch to Apple Music to change a song, reply to a message, and maybe check my photos. When I go back to Safari, boom, the page has to completely reload. It reloads fast thanks to the A13, but it's that constant reloading that gets frustrating. I see this all the time, and it's a common complaint on forums for these 4GB iPhones. On the iPhone 15 with its 6GB of RAM, this rarely happens. Apps just stay in memory, right where I left them. This, more than the raw CPU speed, is the biggest performance difference you'll feel every single day. And this processing gap isn't just about multitasking. You see it in the software itself. Even though both phones run iOS 26, the iPhone 11 doesn't support some of the newer, more processor-intensive features. For instance, it misses out on things like the spatial scene effects in the Photos app and on the lock screen. They're fun features for sure, but their absence really highlights the gap between the A13 and the A16, and that's also why neither of these phones supports Apple Intelligence. They just don't have the necessary chip to run it. When it comes to gaming, both can still play demanding titles like Genshin Impact. The A13 is still running and quite playable. But on the 11, you'll definitely see more frame drops, especially in busy areas, and you might have to lower the graphics settings for a smooth experience. The iPhone 15 handles it much more smoothly. Both phones do get pretty warm after a while though. That's just the nature of running these high-end games on a compact device. Now, cameras. The camera is where you see another massive leap. The iPhone 11 has a great dual 12-megapixel system with a wide and an ultra-wide lens. It introduced Deep Fusion, which was Apple's early computational magic for improving detail. But the iPhone 15 system is a different beast. It has a 48-megapixel main sensor that typically pixel bins down to a super detailed 24-megapixel photo by default. This larger sensor, combined with a wider f1.6 aperture, just captures so much more light and information. It also uses the newer photonic engine, which is like Deep Fusion on steroids, applying that image processing earlier to uncompressed images for better color and detail, especially in mid to low light. The biggest practical advantage of that 48-megapixel sensor is that it gives you a high-quality 2x telephoto zoom. It's not a dedicated optical lens, but it's a crop from the center of that huge sensor, and the quality is fantastic. Way better than the digital zoom on the iPhone 11. For low light, it's not even a competition. The iPhone 11's night mode was revolutionary for its time, but the 15's larger sensor and better processing produce night shots that are dramatically brighter, sharper, and have less noise. You can just see so much more detail in the shadows. And for video, while the iPhone 11 still shoots amazing 4K video, the 15 adds two key features the 11 just doesn't have. First is cinematic mode, which lets you shoot video with that blurry, professional looking background, and even change the focus point after you've shot the video. It's a really cool creative tool. The second is action mode. If you're shooting while running or in a bumpy car, you can turn this on, and it gives you this incredible gimbal-like stabilization. It's super impressive and something the 11 just can't do. For battery life, it's an interesting comparison. Now for full disclosure, for this video I actually had the battery in my iPhone 11 replaced, so it's back at a fresh 100% health. My iPhone 15 is about a year old, has over 200 charge cycles, and is also at 100% health, which is pretty good. In my testing, both phones can get me through a full day of my typical usage. However, the iPhone 15 consistently ends the day with more juice left in the tank. And if battery is your absolute top priority, I should mention that my review also applies to the iPhone 15 Plus model. The only real difference is the larger screen and a much larger battery. User reviews and tests consistently show the iPhone 15 Plus is an absolute battery champion, often lasting even longer than the Pro Max models. And of course the 15 has USB-C, which in 2025 is just so convenient. One cable for my iPhone, my iPad, my Mac, It's how it should be. The 11 is still stuck with the lightning port. Both of these phones are running the latest iOS 26, and I have to say, I'm a huge fan. The new liquid glass design language, with its new animations and translucent effects, feels like a really big visual upgrade over older versions like iOS 18. It makes both phones feel fresh and new. The OS is fluid and stable on both. However, we have to be realistic. The iPhone 11 was released in 2019. Historically, Apple provides major OS updates for about 6 years. That means iOS 26 is very likely the last major update this iPhone 11 will ever get. It will probably get security patches for another year or so, but its feature updates are done. The iPhone 15, on the other hand, has years of updates ahead of it. Now let's talk about Apple Intelligence. The short answer is neither of these phones support it. Apple Intelligence requires an A17 Pro chip or newer, so you need an iPhone 15 Pro or a 16 series phone to get it. Honestly, for me, this is not a deal breaker right now. You know, Apple Intelligence by now is still in its early days, kind of like a public beta. For my serious AI tasks, I'm usually using more powerful alternatives anyway, like Gemini or ChatGPT on my computer. So while it's a factor to consider for future-proofing, its absence on the base 15 isn't a reason to avoid the phone in late 2025. It's also worth noting the 11 misses out on a few other minor iOS 26 features, like the 3D effect on lock screen photos, which requires an iPhone 12 or newer. So to wrap it up, what are the real downsides? For the iPhone 11, it's the 4GB of RAM causing apps to reload, the dated and dim LCD screen, a camera that struggles in low light compared to modern phones, and the fact that it's at the end of its software update life. For the iPhone 15, the biggest downside is still the price, even used, and the fact that Apple is still shipping a 60Hz display on its standard phone in this era, when many Android competitors have faster refresh rates. Looking at the secondhand market in late 2025, you can find a good condition iPhone 11 for around $140 to $200. That is incredible value for a phone that still performs this well. The iPhone 15, being only 2 years old, is going to be a more significant investment, likely in the $400 to $550 range, depending on condition and storage. So the question isn't just which phone is better, it's which phone is better for the money and for you. So here are my final recommendations. For the budget-conscious buyer, if you're on a tight budget and just need a reliable iPhone for calls, texts, social media, and taking decent photos in good light, the iPhone 11 is an amazing choice. It's one of the best budget smartphones you can buy, or entry point for an iPhone today. For the current iPhone 11 user, if you're using an iPhone 11 right now and you're generally happy with it, you can probably squeeze another year out of it. But if that app reloading is driving you crazy, or if you find yourself wishing for a better screen and camera, upgrading to the 15 will feel like a massive transformative leap, or you upgrade to the newest iPhone 17 base model. You will notice the difference everywhere. And for the long-term upgrader, finally, if you're someone who buys a phone and wants to keep it for the next 3, 4, or even 5 years, the iPhone 15 is absolutely the one to get. The OLED display, the 6GB of RAM, the vastly superior camera system, 5G and USB-C make it a much more future-proof device that will feel modern for years to come. So that's my take. 2 fantastic phones, but for very different people in 2025. I'd love to know what you guys think. Are you still rocking an iPhone 11? Thinking of upgrading? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.